right, now it's recording on my screen. Gonna give it a couple more minutes before I start. That way, anyone who is just now hopping in can like get situated as they listen in while I pull up my script. Oh, thank you, Sarah Noth. Um, I'm usually like a very quiet individual, so that's nice to hear. Let's see. Hello, hello to everyone who's just coming in. Please, y'all are gonna make me blush complimenting my voice. uh, let's see. All right, we're coming up on 6 o'clock. Give it maybe just a couple more minutes before I get started, just for folks to trickle in. I want to say around 6:05 is when I'll go ahead and get started. So about 5 minutes. I'm very glad that there's a good amount of folks who are excited for this panel. I didn't expect so many people to show interest in it all that much. I remember, what was it, earlier today? I had woke up and I was just finishing up tinkering with like OBS Studio, and what was I gonna say? I was like tinkering with OBS Studio, and I remember I went to go check like like the interest and such for folks who were like going to like at least check out my panel, and I saw that there were 100 and something of y'all, and in the back of my mind, I just thought of that one clip of SpongeBob where Patrick's just like, "Who are you people?" In a good way, in a very good way. I did not expect so many people to be interested in my panel like that. Um, so yeah, it's very, very exciting. This is going to be kinda, sorta a short panel. Um, Depending on how long the Q&A is, it's supposed to go on for like 30 minutes. Um, but of course, in terms of whenever the next panel is, and again, how long Q&A might be, when I get started, um, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And of course, admins, if you need to like give me a heads up to like cut down on time, always open. All right. Oh man, not I accidentally closed out a studio. Well, luckily that didn't happen while I was actually starting my panel. So I'll go ahead and reopen it now and start another recording. All right. There we go. Okay. Open up my script, make sure things are all shipshape. All right. Okay, I think now is as good of a time as any to go ahead and get started. So, greetings everyone. I'm Sivaan, or Sivaan for short. You may also refer to me by my general pen name, Sivaan of Candlekeep. My pronouns are he, him, himself, and Zizir, zimself with an X, and I am a draconic polymorph from the shimmering shores of the Sword Coast. Today, I will be lecturing on the experience of Archaeosapience. I'll be including information from my original document, which details the aspects of Archaeosapience, as well as weaving in the details of my own Archaeosapien experiences during my discussion. Once the informative portion of this panel concludes, I will shift over to panel questions for any further questions or comments from the audience. I'll be sharing my original document, Archaeosapience to Awaken as Ancient in a Modern Age, the coining post for Archaeosapience, and the coining post for the Archaeosapien flag in panel questions after my lecture as well. This is so that those who feel like Archaeosapience is applicable to themselves or is of any interest to them can explore it further from its roots. I will also link my dream width in panel questions, which is where I originally brainstormed the terminology that I will be sharing with you today. So, without further ado, I will start with the introduction from my original document. 27 years ago, members of alt.horror.werewolves speculated on the possibility of weres with prehistoric phenotypes in a community thread known as Odd Musing Weres of Extinct Animals. Many paleo-weres would come forward to discuss their perspectives both before and after this event. What we recognize as paleotherianthropy today became part of our lexicon as alterhumans and non-humans. But this experience had long existed in our community before it even had a name. As a paleotherian myself, part of me knew that my connection to the past existed beyond my animality. Recently, I had a major species shift into my zonai kin type. In my time as a zonai, I reflected on my experiences as someone who belongs to an extinct fictional race. I'd pondered on the existence of other alterhumans and non-humans whose identities exist within an ancient context as well. As a result, I decided to create my own terminology in hopes of encapsulating this distinct experience of being an ancient entity in the world of modernity. In creating these terms, my goal is to allow space for ancient alterhumans and non-humans to explore our identities with more specificity. The aspects of my own Archaeosapiens are relative not only to my own paleotherianthropy and paleofictionkinity, but to my alterhumanity as a whole. Although I have coined these terms to label my personal experiences with ancient alterhumanity, I fully welcome the usage of these terms on a communal scale if others feel that it aligns with what they experience. It is important to note that my label functionally exists as an umbrella term. Otherkind, therianthropes, fiction folk, folk and terra, and many more members of our community all have the capability of being Archaeosapien if they feel that this describes an intricate part of their identity. End quote. Be it a Diplodocus paleotherian, a Knuckles clan fiction folk, cave art object kind, or Homo habilis alterhumans, Archaeosapience is an experience as rich and varied as the past itself. Functionally, it is an umbrella term for ancient folk who lie within our midst as otherkind, therianthropes, alterhumans, non-humans, and many more. But what is Archaeosapien, you may ask? An Archaeosapien is an individual whose alterhuman or non-human identity is intrinsically rooted in prehistory, antiquity, or mythic accounts of history. Whether experienced through one's animality, sapience, or both, an Archaeosapien is essentially a being of time. As a result of existing in a modern period, Archaeosapiens may feel out of place in modernity on account of being ancient. However, that is completely dependent on the individual. For this portion of the panel, I will go into the details of how I came around to coining Archaeosapien as a label, and of how I personally experience Archaeosapiens. As discussed in my introduction, one of the species that I belong to is that of the Zonai race. Zonai are an ancient civilization of mammalian beings who descended from the skies of Hyrule. In my canon, this is through our connection to the three goddess dragons, Denral, Farosh, and Naydra. We are capable of shapeshifting into dragons through our cultural secret stones, but the draconification process is both sacred and permanent. I personally deviate from the latter aspect of this canon, given my polymorphism. Some are likely familiar with my kind through the gameplay of The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. About 2 months ago, I experienced a stress shift while working at my job. In the middle of this situation, I could sense various aspects of my Zonai traits, such as my ears, darting back and forth to listen out for customers. One glaring aspect of this experience involved me getting lost in how to work the machinery that I needed in order to serve a customer. I would not realize until much later that this moment was a result of my Archaeosapien point of view. Although the most contact I've had with my community's technology was through the game of our origin, I realized that this sudden, poor grasp of modern earthen technology happened because of how accustomed I was to the technology of my kind within my canon. Over the course of several days, I pondered on my state as a Zonai. All that I had longed for lied behind a screen through the perspective of the last person that my kind's leader put his faith in. In this same context, the civilization that I belonged to was now nothing more than scholarly speculation. Our language and architecture was nothing more than a side quest. Our cherished stones were nothing more than a plot point. There was something so humbling about these feelings, more so than anything I've ever felt within my alterhumanity. The closest of which had been similar feelings that I express as a paleotherian for the loss of my kind, whether it be through environmental change, evolution, or human intervention. But in this context, my animality was not a factor. It was my sapience. This grief that I experienced blended the distinctiveness of my archaic longing with my fictionhood. They couldn't be separated from one another, but to my knowledge at the time, I did not know if there was a specific term for alterhumans or non-humans who felt the way that I did. I was long familiar with the term paleotherian, and I am one myself, but I knew that these feelings weren't exclusively relative to animality. At first, I looked into the term prehistoric and weighed in on whether or not that could be it. This, however, was to no avail. Prehistoric is a term pertaining to those whose identity is influenced by a past life or past lives. This was about having a connection to an identity that one once had before the current life they have now, be it in terms of a past species, a past orientation, a past gender, what have you. As nice of a label it did not suit what exactly I had experienced. Since I didn't find any leads outside of prehistoric, I decided that I would create a term that encapsulated how I felt. While I had no grand impact in mind, if I managed to help others put a word to how they experience alterhumanity or non-humanity, the task felt all the more important to embark on. Prior to my stress shift at my job, I learned early into my awakening that my alterhumanity was inherently ancient or older in nature. These feelings never left, no matter how hard it was to pinpoint who and what I was on the basis of species. Having carried over tenfold as a zonai, I decided to analyze this circumstance further by looking at my alterhumanity across all fronts. As mentioned before, I am a draconic polymorph. My sapience and animality respectively exist in tandem with each other as they are the fractures of my polymorphism. My being consists of very archaic, draconic energy. Thus, understanding such details made my disconnect with modernity quite apparent. Out of 63 species with my polymorphism, I found that I have a total of 25 fractures, or the fractic equivalent of a kin type, stereotype, etc., that are inherently ancient in nature. Of these 25 species, some of which originate from earthen backgrounds, whereas others originate from mythical, fictional, conceptual, and object-relative backgrounds. With this in mind, I understand my experience with Archaeosapience as me being an individual whose existence is either gone but not forgotten, in the case of, say, my paleotherian fractures, completely up to the belief of other beings, which is in context to my Archaeosapien species of mythic origin, or completely not believed, as they never physically existed on Earth, such as my fractures as a zonai and a shiny Coridon, respectively. While this is not the totality of my alterhuman experience, it does take up significant portions of my noemata. Furthermore, my nature as an ancient being still exists outside of my Archaeosapien species. Hypothetically, if I wasn't presently shifted into one of my ancient species, I would be an ancient being regardless. I could be a sunfire elf one day, or a bearded vulture the next, but neither would cancel out the archaic quality of my alterhumanity. I am always ancient. As a result, I am constantly aware of how ancient my identity is juxtaposed with my place in modernity. In essence, one can chalk up Archaeosapiens to being fully intrinsic to one's lived experiences. As noted in the following excerpt from my original document, Archaeosapiens is more than a general labeling of one's ancient identity. Quote, "This is an experience that not only shapes an individual's understanding of their alterhumanity or non-humanity, but an experience that affects their relationship with the world around them. Although we are completely ancient folk, we physically exist in a point in time that we originally do not belong to. Some of us may belong on Earth, but in a far distant age in Earth's time as a planet. Some of us may not belong on Earth at all, and are a part of another realm's ancient history. An Archaeosapien's place in time greatly affects how we interact with modern society. In turn, how we structure our lives in the state of modernity allows us to both adapt to these circumstances and foster a unique, intimate relationship with our pasts." End quote. Be it in context to one's experiences in the modern world, or the point in time at which one originally belongs to, personal awareness is the core of Archaeosapiens. This can come to be in context to one's knowledge of past life or past lives, if multiple. That being said, this is not the only means of ancient awareness that one can have. Other spiritual experiences such as dreams, astral journeys, and meditations are examples of how one's ancient awareness can reveal itself. Said awareness can be present outside of spiritual contexts as well. One's noemata of their period of origin, civilization, and culture is more than enough to represent ancient awareness. Other applicable experiences would include awareness of one's natural instincts, dietary habits, and environments, especially in context to ancient animality. While ancient awareness is the center of Archaeosapience, the level of knowledge one has on these matters does not need to be overly extensive, nor does it need to be heavily detailed. To simply hold on to that knowledge is all that one really needs. In the process of structuring this label, I considered what I wanted this label to mean to myself and to my peers. What exactly would it look like to be an Archaeosapien? Would it be loud? Would it be unapologetic? Would it be contemplative? The truth of the matter is, it would be many of these attributes, if not everything under the sun. Embracing one's experiences and existence as an ancient being are the heart of Archaeosapience. Maintaining a consistent relationship between one's true self and one's roots is critical to understanding one's own Archaeosapience. And it's best done through healthy means of reflection, such as journaling, artwork, and communal discussions, the usual you would expect out of a label or a communal space. But even so, self-acceptance is the first step to an awakening, and this is no different in the case of recognizing one's Archaeosapience. Since my own awakening in 2022, I had struggled to truly understand who and what I was. Before I realized most of said difficulty was due to my polymorphism and its fluidity through numerous species. My connection to the archaic and the mythic was one of the few aspects of my alterhumanity that I was sure of. While I do not say this as a guarantee that this connection will automatically make itself aware as it had for me, Archaeosapience is very much an experience born of involuntarity. It doesn't matter if one's non-ancient species outnumbers their ancient species in general, if one exclusively belongs to one ancient species, or any other quantitative circumstances. As long as you've come to discover the existence of this experience within oneself at some point. With that said, I will continue to the final section of this panel. This section focuses on the concept of archaeopothos, which was coined alongside the terms Archaeosapien and Archaeosapience. Before I continue this discussion with the definition of archaeopothos, how it may be experienced as an Archaeosapien, and my own experiences with archaeopothos during my stress shift, I will provide prior context as I had in my initial document on Archaeosapience. At the beginning of this year, I had awakened again as a Therian. Upon awaking to my animality, I had not only realized how it existed alongside my sapiens, but how it primarily existed in a prehistoric context. Originally, I thought myself to be paleo-hearted. However, as time would tell it, I had been wrong about these initial feelings. My feelings had been rooted in immense kinship and brotherhood, and that soon materialized into me taking the form of recurring prehistoric species in my dreams, other than simply feeling connected to them in any kind of way. This soon applied to the few mythic and earthen species that I belonged to as well. As I had gradually grown more aware of myself, I had decided to utilize a resource that I became familiar with shortly after my attendance of this past March's Centaurus Festival. This resource was the Alterhuman Archive. I decided to look into some of the writings uploaded into the archive, specifically writings made by other paleotherians. It was around this point in time that I had come across a piece known as On Extinction by Nomad on a website called The Sanctuary. The nature of my extinction, across many fronts no less, was a topic of interest I had long held upon my therianthropic awakening. Thus, I decided to read what Nomad had to say. As I read On Extinction, there was one passage that stuck with me more than anything else in the entry. It reads as follows. Quote, "That said, being extinct does have a significant impact on how I understand the experience in relation to being Therian. Also, on how I think of the world or of my own spirituality. I miss my time, the way some Therians miss their animal bodies. I guess you could call it time dysphoria, if you wish. While I like this life, this time in this world, and I love exploring it, there's always something lacking. I can't call it home. Home is the place that shows itself in some dreams' astral travels. A past from so long ago no one even remembers. And while I've found places in this world and time that are closer to it, there's always something lacking. They're just imitations. End quote. I sat with this specific passage for a moment. Although I was not familiar with time dysphoria as a concept, at least at that point in time, I still understood where Nomad was coming from because of my own experiences. It never mattered if I mentally shifted into a giant teratorn, a terror bird, a cave lion, or any of the other paleotheriotypes that I held. What I did know, though, was through each of these circumstances was that my kind was gone. My place on Earth was gone, at least in terms of my original habitat. While yes, many of these environments have evolved, they are not the same. My kind could not live on here. Outside of my paleotherianthropy, I provided further context to what this was like as a zonai in my document. Quote, I longed to be with my people, to be a part of our civilization, and to tend to our beloved constructs. I miss the feeling of the sun being the first to touch us in the morning, having been nestled in the sky long before those of us decided to descend into the Pharaon region and eventually the kingdom of Hyrule. I soon realized this feeling went beyond simply longing for my time. I had also longed for the presence of other zonai. The complications with extinction can be summarized rather succinctly. There is no greater loneliness than physically being in a community of none. End quote. I did not have a specific term to describe these feelings, as I had undergone them after my stress shift. Even so, I was determined to press forward and find one for myself and my peers who felt similarly. That is where the term Archaeopothos came into being. Archaeopothos is defined as the experience of longing, yearning, or sorrow pertaining to an individual's ancient roots. Archaeopothos has no limit, no barrier, nothing, except genuine desires for where one belongs and what one once had. However, I would not consider Archaeopothos as a kind of dysphoria, unlike Nomad's own notion of time dysphoria. Given the complexities involving time, place, and species representation, I consider Archaeopothos to be its own experience within alterhumanity and non-humanity, respectively. Reflecting on loss of one's kind, one's species, or one's civilization, all means in which Archaeopothos can be experienced. Other means may include frustration with the state of modernity or the lack of coverage in relation to one's Archaeosapien origins. I know that in my own case, as an Archaeosapien fiction folk, I find myself annoyed at times that most of the context given to my civilization is exclusively because of its relevance to Link's journeys. All in all, I do not shy away from the fact that Archaeopothos is typically a humbling and upsetting experience to have. However, that does not mean there are no ways to process one's Archaeopothos. In my own case, journaling these memories and emotions are a good, safe way to manage one's Archaeopothos. After all, it was through journaling on my personal dreamwit that I was able to construct both the term to describe this experience and the terms to describe Archaeosapiens as a whole. As I conclude this panel, I want to share one last thing. Although being an ancient, often extinct being in a modern world has its difficulties, there is much pride and joy to be had in being an Archaeosapien. Not all can say that they have persisted past the inevitability of extinction and found themselves here in this new, rapidly evolving world. Whether an Indoraptor, a saber-toothed cat, or a member of a lost civilization in a fictional world, all Archaeosapiens are one in the age of modernity. No matter how isolating it may seem, there is much beauty in antiquity. So be proud, be primal, be ancient. I thank you all for listening to me today. It's been amazing to share this with each of you. I'm now going to shift over to panel questions to not only put in the resources that I saved, but also answer some questions or respond to some stuff for folks if you have any commentary or inquiries you have for me. So if you have anything you want to ask, or you're just chilling at the moment, I'm going to go ahead and shift over there. Well, I have considered doing voice work. Um, it's not at the top of my list, but thank you for that. Let's see. Let me go ahead and pull up the coining post. Let's see here. All right, I shared the links in question on panel questions, so that should be all well and good. Um, yeah, so the links I shared are my original document for Archaeosapience, the Archaeosapience coining post on my can't speak today, Tumblr blog, also the Archaeosapience flag post on my Tumblr blog, my Dreamwidth, where I originally brainstormed Archaeosapience and such, and the archived thread for odd musing wares of extinct animals. I also added a little content warning for that thread as well. So let's see what we all got in here. Daystar says, I have no questions, just thanks. I'll be reflecting on this for a while before I can say anything coherent, but this is a wonderful piece in my own self conception, which I have struggled to put in words before. Thank you so much, Daystar. That means a lot to hear. I'm glad that it resonated with you in some way. That really does mean a lot. Thank you for sharing. Let's see here. Roger says, would you say that this concept can apply to an individual ancient creature, not in the way of existed a long time ago, but in the way of has existed for so long that the world they came from is ancient and long gone? We have a lot of vampires and dragons that ache for the times they've come from, but have long outlived. I do think that would apply, yes. Um, that sort of disconnect from the sort of time that you're in versus where you really belong or you feel like you belong would fall within Archaeosapience, yes. Um, so while there's a heavy sort of focus on like prehistory and antiquity and such, or extinction in my case, I do feel like that would still be applicable in context to Archaeosapience, since there is that sort of or particularly Archaeopothos, for that specific desire for a time you once were a part of or once had. Let's see here. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Aik asks, what's your opinion of those with old ancient kin types who find new tech interested in the new world they find themselves in? My opinion is that's completely valid. In my personal opinion, while I do long for my original homes, there are a lot of good things about modernity. I will give it that, you know? Um, while personally, like I do have moments of my Archaeopothos, I don't hate living in the modern age. It's just it feels like a massive disconnect from what I know. But I can absolutely understand those with sort of like older or ancient like species really digging modernity and stuff. That's completely valid. Let's see here. Fractal asks, where would you define ancient as opposed to just old? Also, do you know of any terms that will refer to beings that are old or out of their time but not ancient? So, I don't know if there's any label for those who may feel like they're out of their time, like, but not distinctly ancient. I kind of see what you mean. Um, in all honesty, I'm not sure if there's any terms like that. But if I were to define ancient in this context to my label, I feel like there would be a certain line between old and like modern. So like I guess the line I would put between that and like I would say like earthen context is like anything like after I would say maybe the 19th or 20th century, like those kind of areas. Anything after that would not count as ancient anyway. And while like there's some periods between there that aren't distinctly ancient either, they're still pretty like archaic. They're like old. So I would feel like anything like that's not as like old as say like prehistory or antiquity or late antiquity, but is still like before the periods I just mentioned, that would still fall within Archaeosapience. It's just like a bit of a gray area. Let's see. Lily says the feeling of being disconnected from one's society is one I've been struggling with a lot lately. It sounds quite similar to this Archaeopotos. Yeah, I have the spelling in the document. No problem about that. So, are there related terms, or could the feeling of missing a fantastical community fall under that too? Yeah, I feel like it would still fall with that, even if it may not feel distinctly ancient. That sort of like desire or longing one may have can still be applicable in that context. Um, because sometimes I feel that with certain like kintype, well, fractures in my case, fractures of mine. Like for example, I am a Yautja, not currently shifted into one, but um, and I feel that a lot with my own civilization as a Yautja. I do miss Yautja Prime, and even though in an urban context our culture wouldn't be all that favorable, because if anyone has seen Predator, you would know why. um, I still miss it for all that it is, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Let's see. I'm also a fiction folk from a lost civilization. I think for me, a feeling I often get is a deep sadness because of a lot of history of mine was specifically and deliberately destroyed. And I don't remember a complete picture of what my culture was, like scraps. Do you have any tips for someone in this situation? I absolutely know what that feels like. So, in my own experience being a Zonai, a lot of our culture is just kind of not really a blip, but it is very hidden in Hyrule, like in context to my canon. Because my own canon is very similar to the established canon of Tears of the Kingdom, um, but it has its own sort of histories and stuff working out. With I personally just refer to as canon ambivalent since it's not really fully canon divergent. But that said, I absolutely know what that feels like. Um, my best tips in terms of really bridging that gap or making your peace with that, I would say is really find like I would how do I want to word this? I feel like really in capturing your own experience or your own perspective regarding your community and what you do have left of it is essential. And I think by building upon that in however way you think is best, like say creatively, for example, can be a really good way of sort of bridging a gap between what was lost. I know in my own case, really writing about how I felt as a Zonai, or even, doing like sort of meditative practices and stuff, and really getting in tune with like seeing myself in my original heart home really sort of gave me closure. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee that it'll give you closure as well, but I am giving it as a suggestion. Um, but above all else, I feel like building upon not only your perspective and like building a relationship between you and your roots based on what you do have and how you feel going forward is a good way of sort of mending that gap, even if a lot of it is deliberately destroyed. Swiftpaw says this mentioned in the panel chat, but our system does have a heavy element of it that is connected to medieval times, including dragons and other species that are closer to how they appeared in illuminated manuscripts or bestiaries. I don't think this term would completely fit it, but this panel got me thinking about it. I would say it does, with just the mention of manuscripts and bestiaries as well. If y'all recall, when I was giving the definition of Archaeosapien, it did include mythic accounts of history, and bestiaries and manuscripts actually do fall within that. So I'm not. I'm just saying this again as a suggestion, not point blank, because ultimately that falls on you and those within your system. Um, that it could very well apply if you feel connected with it, or if anyone else within your system feels connected with it. I wouldn't say being connected to medieval times really rules that out. Um, but yeah, just something to think about. Um, let's see here. Weber says, I think I've heard something like acronol for being out of your time. I'm in a similar boat. My fictotype is from the early 1920s. I'd have to look into that. Acronol. That sounds interesting. Let's see here. Have you ever heard of anyone connecting to Archaeosapience because of an archetype? I can easily see many archetypes that come from a distant past time, whether as recent as a night or something more distant, playing into this. And I'm curious if you've ever run across it. I've never personally run across it, but I can absolutely see where you're coming from. Because me personally, I'm also an archetyper, and while I don't have too many archetypes that are rooted in sort of a sort of like ancient tropes and stuff like that, I do have a folk legend archetype, and that does tie into my folk enteric identity as Brer Bear. And Brer Bear being one, or one iteration of this figure within my community, I personally do see myself as also within that experience Archaeosapien there. So it's very possible for someone to sort of connect with Archaeosapiens through an archetype. While Archaeosapiens is more so an umbrella term in terms of species, if someone may feel like that sort of connection within their alterhumanity exists, then that's absolutely positively super cool if that was the case. But I do thoroughly think that is possible. I've never, again, personally come across someone who's identified with my term and also linked it to their archetype, but I would not put it past happening. Let's see here. Oh, that's so sweet, Lily. Let's see. Of course, anytime. All right. For some folks in the community, interacting with other members of their species feels affirming. Does the fact that it wouldn't be possible to interact with /see members of your species IRL play into your experience with time dysphoria and feeling out of place? Let me see. I feel like, yes, it does play into like a visual aspect, but very recently I found out during this con there is also another zone I hear, and when I tell you I was like on the brink of tears while talking with Cry. It was just it was unspeakable for me, at least. Because even though while we both come from the experience that there's not a lot of us, if any, in terms of like general communal discussion, like when I tell you Cry is the only other zone I met before this con, I mean it. And of course, in my own essay, there is, of course, the quote, there's nothing more lonely than being in a community of none. It really does also play into a physical aspect. And that's something I'm still coming to terms with. I know I've long come to terms with that in terms of my paleotherianthropy. But in terms of my paleofictionkinity, I do believe that, at least for me, that does play a significant portion into how I experience Archaeopoptos and being out of place. Because it's sort of like a physical reminder, like not only am I in the wrong realm, but I'm in the wrong realm at the wrong time. And it can be very overwhelming to really sit and think about. But at the same time, it's something that not only am I moving on with and making my peace with over time, but understanding that opening up about these feelings has also helped others sort of engage more with their experience with existence has also been affirming in a way. Let's see here. Another no questions but thanks message, because even though I probably have a lot to learn, I'm so new to the community that I can't really put my questions into words. I feel a bit called out /pause. listening to this in relation to time dysphoria even as a possibility. It's a term I've never heard before, but something I've definitely felt. Oh yeah, no, I felt the same way because I'm such a nerd. I deep dive the Also Human archive like regularly. um, Even if it isn't like an experience personally experienced, I just read it anyway because I just love reading. Um, Reading Nomad's journal on the sanctuary actually was like heavy for me because everything like Nomad was talking about, I just got it like that. Like, even though our experience was different, if I remember correctly, I believe Nomad was a raptor of some kind. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me. Feel free to correct me, archivist. Um, but I absolutely got that feeling, and I'm glad that just from hearing me as well, um, you felt some relation to it, even as you have a lot to learn. And I'm very glad that you're learning. Let's see here. Any more questions or just comments in general? And again, I can also always resend the links to my info in case anyone missed it. Also seeing a lot of typing, so while that's going on, I'm gonna take a water break. All right. Yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead and open back up my notes so I can share the links again. Let's see here. I wasn't in this panel for long, but I still got so much and I really enjoyed it, and it has me questioning slash pause. You did this very, very well, and I applaud and thank you for this. Thank you so much. Believe it or not, again, for a lot of folks in here, this is my very first time being a panelist. um, I was like super nerve wracked leading up to today because one, again, this is my very first panel I've ever hosted. I've been to panels before in like the Centaurus Festival and the Draconic Summit, but I've never actually hosted a panel until today. And then two, um, I mentioned it before with other panelists and the admins, but there was some inclement weather like passing through my city this week, and I was nervous, thinking like, "Oh God, what if for my first panel it just rain? It's just storming like hell." Um, so luckily it wasn't that way. It was like a really beautiful day outside. It was warm. It was smoldering actually, because again, southerner. Yippee for me. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Because that way I got to host this live. And of course, I got to see everyone's comments and questions and just a lot of amazing input today. So I'm really grateful for that. Also, thank you all for all your kind comments in the panel chat. Let's see here. Any advice slash reading on how to deal with the negative feelings stemming from Archaeopotos? Let's see. I know for me, one thing that really sort of helped me in terms of reading was like as I mentioned during my like presentation, was going through like the paleotherian section of the Alterhuman archive, because the first thing I did when I really awakened to that um was I want to know if there's other folks out there who really um understand what it feels like in my position. Um and there were a good amount of animals who did, and I was glad for that. Because even though it felt so isolating just being a part of an extinct species, um, at the same time, when dealing with my own Archaeopotos, I felt very vindicated reading from other individuals who are, dinosaurs, saber tooths, um, all sorts of beings. And while some Archaeosapiens, again, aren't exclusively animals, I still felt like, even as a Zonai, it felt just affirming to read from folks who just get it. And that's one thing I definitely recommend above all else, is just read from paleowares, paleotherians, what have you. Especially in terms of really connecting with others who feel similar to how you do. Let's see here. Oh, do you know about radiant obscurities? I see, because the name is familiar. Let me see. Radiant obscurity. I'm terrible with names. um. Oh yeah. Okay, I just pulled it up. Yeah, in my funny enough, in my search history, yeah. I read some stuff from radiant obscurities here and there. I do so many dives. I'm terrible with names, but I do remember when I like read from somewhere once I get a good visual. Um, but yeah, let's see here. Um, yeah. I'm now thinking about coining a term for old beings because this panel has got me thinking about things, but Archaeosapience definitely doesn't apply to me, and that's valid. I thoroughly encourage folks out there to coin anything that pertains to what you feel if you don't see anything that gives you that sort of feeling about what you distinctly feel. I know there's the concern about terminology that sort of like either falls to the wayside or concerns about like, oh, what if it like it's not given as much focus or attention or not used all that much. I coined Archaeosapien at like without any concern of it being picked up communally. Because this was just something that was true to my alterhuman experience. I cannot stress enough. Coin it. Because even if it's just you using it, there's just something if you're someone who's really into specifically having a label for yourself, just having something to call yourself, especially when it's made by you and for you, it's so vindicating. So yeah, by all means, to Fractal, coin it. I would be happy to boost it also on my socials, wherever you decide to post it. Um, like for me, I use a good amount of labels that aren't really used like that. Such as I mentioned a couple times in passing, Fractic, or like in my another case, Otherborn. I also have like, let me see here. Um, like mainly, and then of course Archaeosapien in of itself. And it's just right for me. And that's really all that matters. And if folks feel along the way, if you talk more about it, that fits them, then that's even better. I know when I coined Archaeosapience on Tumblr, there was a good amount of folks like sharing around my original coining post, but there was this one individual on Tumblr who was a caveman, an alterhuman caveman. And I literally just saw him up and down in my notes, just rejoicing because he found a term that just fit him. And I just saw like how it brought him so much joy because he found a term that fit him as a caveman. And that was incredible to me. That was literally the highlight of me coining Archaeosapien, is that not just the fact that, I have something to really put a name to myself, but even without caring if it got picked up or not, there was someone out there who literally felt similar to me and saw my label and said, thank goodness I finally have something that defines who I am. And that was incredible to see. That was beautiful to see. Let's see here. I agree. Coining helped me. Dreamwalker is a term that I created for myself. I should create a post for it. By all means, Bahari, do it. I cannot stress this enough. Maybe it's the creative in me, but do it. Coin it. Make a post. Put it in writing. Put it in digital writing. Do what you need to do. Coin it. Coin it and post it. I'm also looking at panel chat right now. You know who you will help by describing some experience. So coin. Yep, absolutely, Mothman. Yes, I felt that way when someone coined Cambiotherian. Yes, absolutely. I also have a couple Cambiotherian myself. So yeah, I absolutely feel that way. It's even if something is obscure, identify with it, coin it. One thing about me, I will never care about obscurity. Never. I will explain as much as I have to. As long as that something is me and I feel and know that it is me, I'm gonna call myself it. Obscurity is a formality. Yes, Pigeon. It was recorded. Yeah, I'm sorry. It is a pretty short panel. Mostly the longer part of it is like Q&A because it's the original like frame for the panel is like 30 minutes. But yeah, I'm also double checking the schedule, making sure I don't overlap with someone else. Let's see here. The next panel is going to be in like 10ish, 9ish minutes. So I think I'm going to cut the recording at like 6:55. That way it'll give some folks to switch over to the next panel. So let's see here. I don't know why I keep switching to panel questions on desktop when I have it open on my phone. Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Our personal website has a lot of personal terms on there since we use it like a personal wiki. Making homebrew terms can be really helpful as an ultra-human. I'd actually probably be careful posting it on social media. If you post a term and it gains no attention, we've had the most successful using our terms casually or posting essays or full pages about it. Absolutely. Let's see here. One is related to having incongruence with yourself and yes. If there is anything to come out of this panel with, I 100% recommend. If you feel a certain way about something and you don't quite have a word for it, don't just stew in just stew in a gray area if you don't want to. By all means, coin something, anything. And of course, if you don't rock with labels like that, that's also cool. I'm still rocking with our labelist folks. Let's see here. It's my bestie Coyote. Everyone say hi to Coyote. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for this panel, Sivaan. It's giving me a lot to think about, honestly. Especially lately, I've been seeing myself in a bit of an odd light. Were Coyote and its village, and a shapeshifting coyotropic guide for folks long before out of time. This kind of fits me in a few ways, giving me something to truly think about. So true. Yes, everyone say hi to my good friend Coyote. It's the best. And also, I really appreciate your kind words, Coyote. It means a lot hearing it from you. Let's see. I think before I close out the recording, I'll just reshare the links one more time. It did come to my attention. I noticed in the panel questions that my Dream with link got cut off. So let me fix that real quick before I resend my stuff again. And yes, one more time, thank you all for coming here. I apologize in advance for it being such a short panel for anyone who missed it, but luckily it is being recorded. I think once I'm done wrapping up this recording, I will go ahead and just email it to the admins. But once again, thank you all for your time, and thank you for so much for hearing me out with my label and sharing a lot of your experiences and your inquiries with me. It's been really great, and I will definitely look into being a panelist again sometime soon. If not for other con, then maybe for like since the Centaurus Festival. So yeah. I'm seeing a couple more things in panel questions. Let me see here. Also adding, let me see here. If you coin a term, it really helps to include details or information about your experiences. It's extremely disheartening to find a term that fits you, then be able to find nothing else about it. I agree with Swiftpaw, definitely. Let's see here. One last question for the day. If you coin a term, where's the best place to put the information to share it with the wider public? Everywhere. I cannot stress this enough. Everywhere. But if you're talking if we want to talk in context to like the non-human community and the alterhuman communities, I would say a good place to put it is Tumblr. The community is pretty active on Tumblr, I would say. But another good place, especially since there are still plenty of like other kind therianthropes, alterhumans, non-humans, you name it, uploading there. Another good place also is the Alterhuman Archive. Now, I will say the archive is not a wider place since it's an archive. It's not like social media, so it's not like it's like constantly shared. But it is a good place if you want to really set it in stone. But in terms of platforms, I would say Tumblr is a good place to do that. There's also, let's see here. I noticed Calixa put I think it's the Alterhuman Reddit in there as well. I would say that's also a good place. I don't know if the Alterhuman community is super active on Twitter. I know there's a good amount of folks, but I don't know if it like really circulates coinings or flags like that. But yeah, I would say those places are still good places to put in for if you want to coin something. Let's see here. Where can I find the recordings, or do I have to record? The recordings will be up on the other con YouTube. Promoting making a Neo Cities to post your. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Swiftpaw. Make a Neo Cities. Make a Dream With. Those are also good places. Those are good places for archiving and also just good places in general to put stuff up about your experiences as an alterhuman, non-human, therian, other kind, whatever label or no label that you go by, do it. Even if you're afraid of coding, do it. I am terrible at coding, but I have my Neo Cities in the social media, and I can share that again in panel questions. But I also highly recommend making a Dream With or a Neo Cities to archive your work. But without further ado, it's coming up on 6:57. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. Thank you all so much one more time for coming here and spending time with me and discussing with me about my label and your own personal experiences and inquiries. So thank you all so much. I hope you'll have a good evening or good morning, good day, good middle of the night. Wherever you are right now, I hope you're doing good. And I shall see you all around later. Enjoy the rest of the con.